Tomorrow marks 6 weeks until early voting opens for the October election. For the Opportunities Party, it is the ultimate test of a new election strategy. After falling short of the 5% party vote threshold in the last 2 elections, party leader Raf Manji is hoping to win the Ilam seat and break into Parliament. Kia ora, good morning.
Good morning.
Why is this election different?
I think we're sort of at the end of a 35-year cycle where we are facing enormous challenges around climate change, around inequality, a lack of sense of direction for the country. And we have some clear choices ahead of us. Do we go backwards or do we go forwards? And we're focused on forwards. That's why a lot of our policies are future focused and forward looking. And I think it's really important that people get behind that movement and start to think about the future they would like to see.
Why is your strategy in this election different to the previous 2?
I think getting 5% for a new party hasn't been done before. It's really difficult. It takes a huge amount of resource. And for me, Christchurch is my story. It's why I'm in politics, post-earthquakes, the 15th of March attacks. And Ilam is home for me, and this will be my 4th campaign in 10 years. I've been elected there before, and I think I can win the seat.
In the spirit of democracy then, let's talk about some policy issues you're bringing forward. Today you are announcing a teal visa. Give us the details.
Well, essentially we have a lot of interest from people overseas to come and live in New Zealand. We have a bunch of visa proposals around what we call active investors, where people can basically pay to come here and get residency as a pathway to citizenship. But a lot of that stuff is directed by the government. Like, the government will tell you where to invest. It doesn't really add value to the country. At the same time, we are facing enormous pressures around climate change. Climate impacts, particularly in the Pacific, our cousins, where they live. The issue around climate settlement is going to become much more important, and climate impacts. And we thought, well, let's try and put those 2 things together. So today we're announcing a visa. It's the teal visa, where investors can invest $3 million per visa. It's slightly lower than the current requirement. And that money will go into a climate resettlement fund. And that fund essentially will focus on resettling people from climate impacted areas, investing back into those communities, providing scholarships and educational pathways, particularly around climate change adaptation and impacts. And this is a world first. It's not been done before. And I think it's something that will be more of an attractive sell to people who want to move to New Zealand, that they're actually investing in something that has a positive outcome.
When you say investing, to think about it from the active investor's perspective, is it an investment for which they get a return? Their
return is actually investing in the future of climate impact.
That's charity though, right?
No.
Oh, no, but at the moment, let's think, so the active investor at the moment, I think it's 5 million, the equivalent of 5 million in an investment, right? But after a certain period of time, you get your money back.
Yes.
Hopefully, with some sort of margin on top of it.
Yeah.
Under your proposal, you give $3 million. You don't get that $3 million back.
No, it's an investment.
That's charity.
It's a one-way investment.
That's charity.
Well, you could look at it as philanthropy.
Yeah.
But that's why we pitched it at a slightly lower amount. So it's for people actually who do have an interest in that. They want a cleaner path to residency, and it's something that they want to invest in. It's something that they're interested in. And I think the idea of having a cleaner approach means they don't have to kind of have government deciding where to put money. And if we look at the numbers, I think we had over 430 people interested a couple of years ago in these visas. Recently, I think there's been 30 applications.
Yeah, I think it's 15 in 2023.
Yeah, because actually it's too difficult. So what we want is we want these people to come here and have an easy pathway and feel good about it. Then once they're here, they can start making investments that they choose.
But it's 15 applicants at the moment for 2023 under a system through which they get their money back with a margin on top. You think it's going to be more when they give $3 million but they don't get their money back?
Yeah, because this is the attractive nature of the proposition, that it is a philanthropic investment. And for people who are invested in climate. So a lot of people will be coming here because they're worried about climate impacts in their own countries, and they're thinking actually New Zealand looks like the best place to be. So it's connecting those 2 things up, and that's why we're limiting it to 100 visas in year 1. So it is an experimental visa, but we think it's quite important.
Okay, talk to us about your tax policy.
Yes, the tax switch. So what I love is that we proposed the tax switch last October, which was essentially shifting the burden of tax from income onto land. So essentially our biggest problem is the cost of housing. People were probably 10, 15 years ago maybe paying 30, 35% of their disposable income towards housing costs. It got up as high as 55%. It's still very high. It's the biggest problem we have in New Zealand. We want people to be able to afford a home. And people are struggling. We have over 30,000 people still on the emergency housing wait list. That's after 6 years of this government, investing in new public housing. It's a real problem. It's too expensive, and our kids are going overseas, and we don't want that to be happening. So we're actually saying, let's get to grips with this problem, and governments have refused to take it seriously, and we think actually it's going to drive a change and rebalance the cost of incomes versus housing.
How does it work? So
essentially we apply a small annual tax on the urban residential land, so it's on your land value, not your house value.
A small tax.
Yes,
a being small subjective.
Well,
is a small tax?
0.75%.
Right.
0.75%, and that money goes towards income tax cuts. So we're basically trying to put more incomes in people's pockets, and yes, people are paying. So this actually is instead of a capital gains tax. So this is actually just trying to make a very, very simple shift between our real problems around land values. Land values have continued to go up. I mean, if we think about over the last 20 years, house prices are up 450%. Wages are up about 55%.
Right.
That's the problem that we need to solve, because this can't continue forever. Otherwise, no one's going to be able to afford to live in a home.
So if you are living in a home that has a land value of $2 million,
yes,
you pay $15,000 a year in tax.
Yes. Yes, and then you will have obviously income tax cuts on the other side, depending on what your incomes are.
Well, provided you have an income, right? So,
yes.
so what happens if you're a retired couple and you're living in a house that you've been in for 40 years and the land is worth $2 million?
Yeah, you can defer it until you sell that home.
And how does that work?
Well, that will just roll up, a bit like you can do with rates.
Yeah,
so at the moment,
who gets to defer?
If you're a pensioner,
right,
and you're sitting in a home that has a high land value, but you don't want to move, well, you don't have to pay until you sell that property. So it's the same with council rates. So we had the same issue in Christchurch. A lot of pensioners were complaining that rates were too high. We said you can defer it until you paid off or moved home.
How's this policy going down in Fendleton?
Mixed, to be fair. But you have to remember,
what are the criticisms
yeah.
that people have in Fendleton?
They just don't like paying more tax.
So it's more tax for some people. Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. But actually, if you look at the median house price in Ireland, it's around $700,000. So actually, most people will be better off. Renters will be better off because they're not paying it. So I think it's just, look, people struggle with the idea that they have to pay a bit more tax. But then when you say to them, how are your kids going to afford a house? They go, oh, well, we might buy for them. And we need to get away from that. So I think one thing I would say about tax policy is I don't think tax policy should be an election issue. It's something that we should be having cross-party conversations about in between elections, and everyone should get around the table and say, how are we going to solve this problem? Instead, we have Labour constantly ruling out a capital gains tax, which actually would be a pretty straightforward thing to do. National are supporting land value capture, which they don't talk about a lot, but actually they do support land value taxation to pay for infrastructure. It's used around the world, it's quite normal. Greens and Te Pāti Māori have gone with wealth taxes, which are never going to happen. And that's not very helpful for the general public in terms of making a selection. So we actually need to make some kind of commitment that actually we are going to deal with the housing issue, and we all need to get around the table and do it together.
One last policy pitch. Tell us about the teal card.
Oh, well, this is my favourite one, because this is about investing in our future generations. And it is so clear to me that there are too many of our kids are not entering adulthood with the skills that they need. So we want to support them, take a preventative approach, invest in them through fully funded healthcare, through fully funded public transport, subsidies for e-bikes, e-scooters, mobility to get them around, and a national civic service model, which I've had huge feedback on, not just from young people, but from older people who actually remember a time actually where people did do some kind of service. And I think the service aspect, when we think about long-term social cohesion, this is what we learned with the Student Volunteer Army. I mean, this idea has come out of the Student Volunteer Army, of the post-Christchurch response. And if you think what we've been through in Christchurch over the last 10 years, the earthquakes, the floods, the fires, the 15th of March, and every time we saw huge community outpouring. Now, preparing our kids with things like civic literacy, financial literacy, first aid, driving lessons, a sense of purpose that takes them into adulthood is absolutely critical. Now, the teal card as a vehicle, as a platform for investing in our future generations, I think absolutely is critical.
Just to be totally clear, it's like a gold card
for young people.
For young people.
Yes.
So who gets it, And what does the civic service
Yes, so essentially it's the cut-off age at the moment is 30. So essentially we're saying to ourselves, we're investing in younger people. Hopefully by 30, people are in a position where they don't need that support anymore. Then from 65 and onwards, we have the gold card. And when I'm talking to people about it, like, I was doing a talk at University of Canterbury recently, half of the audience were the grandparents. They all had gold cards, and half of them were students. And that intergenerational conversation is the one that we need to have. And yet everyone in the middle, they're working hard, they've got kids, they've got parents, they're too stressed to think about it.
Is the civic service compulsory?
It's not compulsory, no. But if you want to collect the financial aspect of this, which is a $5,000, you can think of it as a mini universal basic income for all people. The way we're going to structure it is probably, particularly if you're taking a child from birth, is opening a bank account, KiwiSaver account, $250 a year going into that account. That helps us with the financial literacy process as children grow up. And we have organisations already, Christchurch organisation Banker, already doing financial literacy in schools. So that's absolutely critical. So we want this to be experiential. So the way we design the course is completely open, but we want every kid to have gone through it. Now in France, they're bringing compulsory national civic service for a year, which obviously is quite a long time. We're saying do a 5-day course. It could be residential, it could be non-residential, but I think that sense of social cohesion and connection with your fellow citizens is quite important.
October 15th, if you're in a position where the Opportunities Party holds the balance of power, how would you conduct negotiations?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our position has been quite clear. We will go on the crossbenches. We will not, regardless of what happens, be in government in terms of...
And that differs from in the past, from your position in the past.
Yes, yeah. And I think it's important because I think we're an independent party. We want to bring some new ideas, be a policy incubator, be able to work collaboratively across Parliament. So we will sit on the crossbenches. We will abstain on a confidence vote. So essentially, if you have a grouping who has 59 or 60 seats, we will say, fine, you go ahead, call up the Governor-General and say you can form a government. Then after that, in terms of how we engage around confidence and supply and budget issues, that's something we will work out. And that's really a conversation for the new government to say to us, either we're happy you being where you are, or we'd like to tie a few things up, and what would you want for that to happen?
You've published your party list, 13 candidates running in electorates around the country. You dropped your co-deputies.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Well, that was essentially a squad leader approach. So I needed somebody in Wellington, somebody in Auckland to look after the team. And then after sort of 4 or 5 months, well, we had a lot of new candidates. It was actually, okay, who do I want in Parliament? And what kind of structure do I want? And
so why not those previous
Well, because I realised I needed a single deputy leader, and I wanted them based in Wellington Central. And Natalia Albert, who is our deputy leader and candidate there. And a lot of this also is like, where are we going to get the media focus? So Wellington Central will have a new MP. It is the most politically active electorate in the country. So she is out there doing stuff every day, and that's raising awareness. We have Dr. Nina Sue in Epsom, who is an emergency doctor. She's doing a fantastic job. We have Ben Peters, Dr. Ben Peters.
You've got 13 candidates around the country. No Māori or Pacifica.
No.
But by my count, you have more PhDs than you have Māori or Pacifica in your candidates. Why is that?
We ran a open candidate selection program.
So why don't Māori or Pacifica want to stand for top?
I think, look, I tried to recruit some quite senior Pacifica people. They chose to go with other parties. And I
what parties did they go with?
I can't say that. We did have conversations with potential Māori candidates. But I think for a lot of people, it's the risk. It's a huge deal to step forward and put your name forward for this. And yeah, we just this time didn't happen to come up with a Māori or Pacifica candidate. But hopefully next time.
Have you polled Ireland?
There is some polling, which I should hopefully be getting in the next week or so. Yeah. Look, we're pretty positive. We think it's going really well. We think we're going to win Ireland.
Do you think the other parties have polled Ireland?
I have heard that there has been some polling, but it hasn't been released, so draw your conclusions from that. But essentially, I'm up against 2 backbenchers. You know, this is my 4th campaign. I've represented the city before. I understand local and central government, and I think I'm the best choice.
All right. We look forward to you passing on your polling as soon as you get those numbers. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Good luck for the campaign. The Opportunities Party leader, Raf Manji.